The last words my boss ever said to me were, "Clara, you're just no longer a fit for our vision." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even said with any particular malice. Cassandra delivered the line with the same calm, placid tone she used to order her unsweetened iced tea every morning. It was a simple statement of fact, as undeniable as the polished glass desk that sat between us, reflecting a distorted, wobbling version of my own face. My mouth was slightly open, my eyes wide. I looked like a fish that had just been pulled from the water, gasping in a world that had suddenly run out of air. Her office was on the 34th floor, a corner suite that looked out over the entire city. It was a cage of glass and steel, and on sunny days like this one, the light was so bright it was almost sterile. It smelled of expensive perfume, a sharp white floral scent, and the faint, clean hum of the air purifier in the corner. For 7 years this office had been my second home. I had helped her pick out the abstract art on the walls. I had been there when the ficus tree in the corner was delivered, a tiny sapling that was now brushing against the ceiling. I had helped her build Aura marketing from the ground up. I wasn't just an employee, I was her first hire, her right hand, the architect of her biggest campaigns. I was the one who stayed until midnight preparing the decks, the one who calmed down frantic clients, the one who remembered her husband's birthday when she forgot. We had a rhythm, a partnership. Or so I thought. A fit. I finally managed to say. The words felt like sandpaper in my throat. "Cassandra, I helped create the vision." She offered a small, tight smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were like polished river stones, smooth and unreadable. "And we appreciate your contributions, Clara. We really do. But we're moving in a new direction. A more aggressive, leaner direction. This is a business decision, not a personal one." A business decision. She slid a thick white envelope across the desk. My severance. My life, my loyalty, my late nights and sacrificed weekends, all neatly packaged and legally binding. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The envelope was cold, heavy. I looked at her, really looked at her, searching for a flicker of the woman I thought I knew. The woman who had cried on my shoulder when her father was sick. The woman with whom I'd shared countless lunches, laughing over salads as we mapped out the future of our company. There was nothing. Just a perfectly composed mask. She had already moved on. In her mind, I was already gone. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. A cold, quiet dignity settled over me like a shroud. I stood up, my chair making a soft scraping sound on the marble floor. I nodded once, a gesture that felt both final and hollow. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. Not at all. Walking back to my desk felt like walking through a dream. The open-plan office, usually buzzing with the creative chaos I loved, seemed distant and muffled. Faces looked up, then quickly away. They already knew. I packed my belongings into a sad little cardboard box. A framed photo of my husband Mark and me on our anniversary trip to the coast. A mug that said "World's Best Strategist." A gift from my team. A wilting succulent I could never quite keep alive. Each item felt like a relic from a different life. A life that had ended 15 minutes ago in a sterile, sun-drenched office. As I rode the elevator down, the box pressed against my chest and I felt a profound sense of dislocation. I had poured my soul into that place. My professional identity was so intertwined with Aura marketing that I wasn't sure who I was without it. The first thing I did when I got to my car was call Mark. I needed to hear his voice. He was my rock, my steady ground in a world that had just tilted off its axis. He always knew what to say. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Hey honey, everything okay?" I took a shaky breath. "They let me go, Mark. Cassandra fired me." There was a pause. It was just a second too long. In the background I could hear the faint sound of jazz. "Oh wow," he said. His voice sounded strange, distant. "Honey, I'm so sorry. That's terrible." She said I wasn't a fit anymore. I started to cry then, quiet, hiccuping sobs. After everything I did for her. For that company. "I'm in the middle of something right now," he said, his voice rushed. "Can I call you back in a little bit?" "Don't worry. It's her loss, Clara. You're brilliant. We'll figure this out." He hung up before I could reply. I sat in my car in the parking garage, the engine off, the silence ringing in my ears. I looked at the picture in the box on the passenger seat. Mark and I, smiling, the ocean breeze in our hair. He was right. We would figure this out. We always did. But as I stared at his smiling face, a tiny, cold splinter of doubt worked its way into my heart. It was a feeling I had never had before in our 15 years together. A feeling that something somewhere was terribly wrong. I drove home in a daze, the city streets blurring past me. The box of my life sat on the passenger seat, a silent, reproachful passenger. Our house, a cozy two-story craftsman that Mark and I had bought 10 years ago and lovingly restored, usually felt like a sanctuary. Today it felt like an empty stage. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood did little to soothe the frantic buzzing in my head. Mark and I had built a good life here. A quiet, comfortable life. We met in college. He was the charming, easygoing architecture student who could talk his way into any party, and I was the focused, intense marketing major who preferred the library. We balanced each other. He softened my sharp edges and I gave his creative spirit a little structure. Our marriage was like our home. Solid, filled with shared history, every scuff on the floorboards a memory. Our mornings were a well-worn routine. I'd be up first, the smell of coffee brewing as I checked emails. He'd wander down a few minutes later, his hair a mess, and wrap his arms around me from behind, burying his face in my neck. "Morning, superstar," he'd mumble, his voice thick with sleep. We weren't a couple that needed grand romantic gestures. Our love was in the small things. The way he always saved me the last piece of chocolate, the way I knew exactly how he liked his toast, the comfortable silence as we read in the evenings, our feet tangled together on the sofa. For 15 years he had been my constant. When my mother passed away, he held me for hours, not saying a word, just letting me cry until I had nothing left. When I was terrified to pitch my first major campaign for Cassandra, he'd sat with me all night, acting as a one-person focus group until I felt confident. He was my anchor. So when he finally came home that evening, hours later than usual, I was desperate for that anchor. I had spent the afternoon replaying Cassandra's words, the cold finality in her voice and my own numb response. He walked in, dropping his briefcase by the door with a heavy thud. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie. "Rough day." I was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a glass of wine. I looked up at him, my eyes puffy. "You could say that." He came over and kissed the top of my head. It was a fleeting, distracted gesture. "I told you it's her loss. Honestly, Claire, maybe this is a good thing. That place was draining you. All those late nights, the stress. You deserve better." His words were supportive, exactly what a loving husband should say. But his tone was off. It was too smooth, too practiced. He wasn't looking at me but past me towards the fridge. "Is there any of that leftover pasta?" "Mark," I said, my voice quiet. "I lost my job. The job I've had for 7 years. Can we just talk about it for a minute?" He turned, finally meeting my eyes. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Of course, honey. I'm sorry. You're right." He pulled up a stool beside me. "Tell me what happened. Did she give you any real reason?" I recounted the conversation, the sterile office, the empty words about a new direction. He listened, nodding in all the right places, but his attention felt divided. His phone, which he'd placed face down on the counter, buzzed twice. He didn't reach for it, but I saw his eyes flicker towards it. "She's a snake," he said when I finished. "I never trusted her. The way she took all the credit for your work." He squeezed my hand. "You're going to find something so much better. This is the start of a new chapter for you." He was framing it as an opportunity, a positive spin. Usually I would have appreciated his optimism. But right now it felt like he was dismissing my pain. It felt like he was in a hurry to move past it, to check the comfort wife box and get on with his evening. The days that followed fell into a strange, unsettling pattern. I spent my time listlessly scrolling through job sites, the rejection from Aura feeling like a brand on my resume. Mark, meanwhile, grew more distant. The late nights at his architecture firm became more frequent. "Big project," he'd say vaguely. "This new client is a real taskmaster." He became fiercely protective of his phone. It was never left on the counter anymore. It was always in his pocket. He started taking calls in the other room, closing the door behind him. Once I walked into the study while he was on the phone, and he ended the call abruptly, a flicker of panic in his eyes before he smiled and asked if I needed something. "Who was that?" I asked casually, trying to keep my tone light. "Just a contractor," he said a little too quickly. "We're having issues with the zoning permits for the new build." It was all plausible. He was an architect. He had contractors, clients, and zoning issues. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had just lost my job. My self-esteem was at an all-time low. Of course, I was feeling insecure. I was projecting my own anxieties onto him, onto us. A happy marriage doesn't just crumble overnight. But the splinter of doubt that had lodged itself in my heart that day in the parking garage was beginning to fester. It was a low, constant hum beneath the surface of our lives, a note of discord in our familiar melody. The breaking point came about 3 weeks after I was fired. I was doing laundry, gathering Mark's clothes from the hamper. As I emptied the pockets of his suit trousers, my fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt. My heart gave a sharp, painful jolt. It wasn't from a hardware store or a client lunch. It was from a florist. A very expensive florist in a part of town we never went to. The purchase was for a single elaborate bouquet of white orchids. The date was from the week before. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't our anniversary. I stood there in the quiet laundry room, the scent of detergent in the air, the smooth, crisp paper in my hand. There was no reason for him to be buying orchids. No reason he would tell me about, anyway. And as I stared at the elegant script of the florist's logo, a name I recognized instantly, the cold dread that had been pooling in my stomach turned to ice. It was Cassandra's favorite florist. The same one she used for all the corporate events at Aura. The same one that delivered a fresh orchid to her desk every single Monday morning. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the hum of the washing machine filling the silence. The receipt wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a translation. It took all the strange, discordant notes of the past month, Mark's distance, the secretive phone calls, the rushed excuses, and arranged them into a horrifyingly clear piece of music, a funeral dirge for my marriage. I didn't cry. The shock was too sharp, too cold for tears. I folded the receipt carefully as if it were a precious, fragile thing, and slipped it into the pocket of my jeans. Then I walked back into the kitchen and waited. The house was quiet. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hardwood floors. I looked around at the life we had built. The cookbooks spattered with sauce, the dent in the wall where Mark had accidentally hit it while carrying in our new sofa, the crayon drawing from our niece taped to the refrigerator. It was a museum of a life that was already over. I just hadn't known it. When I heard his car pull into the driveway, my heart didn't leap. It settled heavy and hard in my chest. He walked in, whistling softly, a tune I didn't recognize. "Hey honey, you won't believe the traffic," he started, shrugging off his jacket. I didn't say anything. I just stood by the kitchen island, my arms crossed, and waited for him to look at me. When he finally did, his cheerful expression faltered. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing with performative concern. "You look pale." Slowly, I pulled the receipt from my pocket and slid it across the cool granite countertop. Stopped right in front of him. He glanced down. I watched as the color drained from his face. For a single breathless moment, I saw pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes. It was there and then it was gone, replaced by a careful, guarded mask. "It's a receipt," he said, his voice a little too casual. "For flowers." "I can see that," I said. My own voice was steady, terrifyingly so. It didn't sound like me. Sounded like a stranger. "White orchids. From Le Fleur Boutique. An interesting choice." He tried to laugh it off, a hollow, tinny sound. "Yeah, it was for the Henderson account. His wife's a big deal in the arts community. Just a little something to smooth the way. You know how it is." The lie was so blatant, so insulting in its simplicity, that something inside me snapped. The fog of grief and confusion burned away, leaving behind a cold, apparent rage. "The Henderson account," I repeated softly. "And you're the lead architect on that, are you? Funny, I thought it was David's project. And you chose to go all the way across town to Cassandra's personal florist? The one that costs a fortune? For a client you're not even managing." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. He had no answer. He had assumed I was too broken, too preoccupied with losing my job to notice. He had underestimated me. "The late nights, Mark," I continued, my voice low and cutting. "The big project. The hushed phone calls. Your sudden obsession with keeping your phone glued to your hip. How stupid do you think I am?" "Clara, stop," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You're twisting things. You're upset about the job and you're taking it out on me." "The job." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, this is about so much more than the job. This is about her, isn't it? I leaned forward, my hands flat on the island. It's Cassandra. Saying her name out loud was like lighting a match in a room full of gas. The air crackled. He flinched as if I'd struck him. And that was it. That was all the confirmation I needed. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. A clock he had given me for our 10th anniversary. Finally, he slumped against the counter, deflating like a punctured balloon. He couldn't even look at me. He stared at the floor, a man confessing to the tiles. Yes, he whispered. The word was small, pathetic. How long? I demanded. A few months. It just happened, Clara. We were working on a charity gala committee together. We just started talking. Talking, I scoffed. You blew up our 15-year marriage for a little talking? He finally looked up and his eyes were full of a weak, pleading guilt. It's more than that. I think I'm in love with her. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. But the worst was yet to come. I had to know. The final, terrible piece had to be placed. My job, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Cassandra firing me. Was that, did you know? He looked away again, and in that gesture, I saw the full scope of his betrayal. It wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy. She thought it would be better this way, he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. Cleaner. So we could be together without complications. Cleaner. The word echoed in the silent kitchen. They had decided to excise me from my own life like a tumor. She didn't just want my husband, she wanted my job, my career, my entire world. She tried to erase me, and the man I had loved and trusted for half my life had held the door open for her. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the clock at his head. A strange and terrifying calm washed over me. The love I had felt for him for 15 years curdled and died in that instant. It was replaced by something cold, sharp, and focused. It was the same strategic focus I used to dismantle a competitor's market share. The same methodical precision I used to build a winning campaign from scratch. I looked at him, at this stranger standing in my kitchen. Get your things, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion at all. Get a bag and get out of my house. He started to protest, to say my name, but I held up a hand. Now. He saw the look in my eyes and knew there was no room for argument. He turned and walked up the stairs, a defeated man. I stood there listening to the sounds of him packing, drawers opening and closing, the zip of a suitcase. He wasn't just packing clothes. He was packing up our lives. And as I stood there in the ruins, I made a silent vow. They wanted to erase me. They thought I was a complication to be removed. They had no idea who they had just declared war on. Cassandra had taken my job. He had taken my husband. But I had built that company with her. I knew its every strength, every client, and more importantly, its every weakness. They thought this was the end of my story. It was just the beginning of theirs. The days that followed Mark's departure were a blur of hollow hours and a silence so profound it felt like a presence in the house. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching the furniture he'd helped me pick out, seeing his phantom shape in the armchair where he used to read. The first wave of grief was immense, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. But beneath it, that cold, hard nucleus of rage remained, a pilot light waiting for fuel. I gave myself 1 week. 1 week to fall apart. I cried until my head pounded. I didn't answer the phone. I ate ice cream straight from the carton and watched old movies until my eyes burned. I allowed the full, crushing weight of the betrayal to wash over me, to feel every ounce of the pain. I knew if I didn't, it would poison whatever came next. On the 8th day I woke up and the world seemed to have come back into focus. The sun was shining. I took a shower, got dressed, and made a pot of coffee. I sat at the kitchen island, the exact spot where my world had shattered, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed, a blank slate. My severance from Aura was generous. Cassandra had probably insisted on it, a guilty conscience salved by an extensive check. She thought money would shut me up and send me quietly into the night. It was her first mistake. That money wasn't a consolation prize. It was my seed capital. For 7 years I had been the brain behind Aura's success. Cassandra was the face. She was beautiful, charming, and ruthless in a boardroom. She could sell ice to Eskimos. But she didn't understand the mechanics of the business. She didn't know the clients on a personal level. She didn't understand the intricate data analytics that drove our campaigns or the subtle psychological triggers that made consumers click buy. I did. I knew that Aura's biggest client, a luxury skincare brand called Lumina, was deeply unhappy with Cassandra's hands-off approach. I knew their CEO, a formidable woman named Eleanor Vance, valued personal connection and meticulous detail above all else, things Cassandra had long since delegated. I had been Eleanor's go-to person for 5 years. I also knew that Aura's second-largest client, a sustainable tech startup called Greenleaf, was on the verge of launching their biggest product. Their marketing budget was about to triple and they were nervous. Their young CEO Ben Carter was brilliant but insecure. He relied on my guidance, my steady hand. He had called my work phone 3 times the week I was fired and I never had the chance to call him back. I knew Cassandra wouldn't have the patience for his endless questions. And I knew Aura's greatest weakness. They had become complacent. They were big, slow, and over-reliant on a handful of major accounts. They had grown arrogant, believing themselves to be untouchable. My plan began to form, not as a messy act of revenge, but as a clean, precise business strategy. It was a hostile takeover not of the company itself but of its lifeblood, its clients. I started by creating a new entity. I called it Phoenix Strategies. The name felt right, rising from the ashes. I filed the paperwork, set up a business bank account, and designed a simple, elegant website overnight. It was sparse but professional. Then I made my first call, not to a client but to my old team. I called Sarah, my brilliant junior strategist, a young woman with a mind like a steel trap whom I had mentored for 2 years. She had been devastated when I left. "Clara, oh my God, I'm so glad you called," she said, her voice a hushed rush. "It's a disaster here. She's running things into the ground. She doesn't know what she's doing. And Ben from Greenleaf is about to walk. He says no one understands his vision anymore." "I have a proposal for you, Sarah," I said calmly. "It's a risk. But I'm starting something new. Something small, nimble, and client-focused. I can't match your Aura salary right away, but I can offer you equity. A chance to build something from the ground up. With me." I didn't need to sell it. He said yes before I even finished the sentence. Next, I called David, our best graphic designer, an artist who was tired of having his bold ideas watered down by Cassandra's corporate-friendly taste. He was in too. Within 2 days I had a skeleton crew, the 3 of us, the core of what had made Aura's creative department so effective. My next call was to Eleanor Vance at Lumina. I didn't mention Aura. I didn't mention Cassandra or Mark. I said I had started my own consultancy and wanted to treat her to lunch to get her perspective on the industry. We met at a quiet, elegant restaurant. Eleanor was in her late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Clara," she said, getting straight to the point, "I was shocked when I heard you'd left Aura. You were the only one over there who understood our brand DNA." "I felt it was time for a change," I said diplomatically. "I wanted to get back to a more hands-on personal approach. I feel that's what's missing in the industry right now. Agencies get big and they lose the soul of the work." I spent the next hour not selling her on Phoenix but listening to her. I asked about her new product line, her challenges with international distribution, and her vision for the next 5 years. I took notes. I engaged. I remembered the names of her grandchildren, which I knew from our old calls. At the end of lunch, she leaned back and studied me. "You know our contract with Aura is up for renewal in 2 months, don't you?" "I was aware," I said softly. "They sent over a preliminary proposal last week," she said, a hint of disdain in her voice. It was generic. A cut-and-paste job. Cassandra didn't even bother to show up for the initial call. She sent some junior account manager I'd never met. She took a sip of her water. "Send me a proposal, Clara. Show me what Phoenix Strategies can do." The final piece of the initial puzzle was Ben Carter from Greenleaf. I emailed him. Subject: Your vision. "Hi Ben. I know we lost touch abruptly. I've started my own firm and I've been thinking a lot about your upcoming launch. I have a few ideas for capturing the market in a way that feels authentic to your mission. Asterisk. No strings attached. Let me know if you're free for a 15-minute call. Asterisk. Best, Clara." He replied in under 5 minutes. The call was that afternoon. He was panicked. Aura was pushing for a flashy, celebrity-endorsed campaign that felt entirely out of step with his brand's grassroots, eco-friendly ethos. "They're not listening to me, Clara," he lamented. "It's like they just see the dollar signs. They don't get the why behind what we do." "I do, Ben," I said. And I did. I spent the next 30 minutes walking him through a completely different strategy. A community-based, story-driven campaign focusing on the real-world impact of his technology. It was a strategy one had been quietly developing in my head for him for months. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Clara," he finally said, his voice full of relief. "That's it. That's the campaign. How do I hire you?" I told him I'd send over a proposal. That night, for the first time in a month, I slept soundly. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a founder. I was a CEO. And I was just getting started. The pieces were moving. The foundation of Cassandra's empire was built on my old relationships, and I was about to pull them out one by one. The following weeks were a whirlwind of focused, relentless work. My home, once a monument to a failed marriage, transformed into a bustling startup headquarters. My dining room table became our boardroom, covered in laptops, strategy boards, and empty coffee cups. Sarah and David worked from their own homes, but we were in constant communication, a small, agile unit fueled by a shared purpose. There was a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. At Aura, my ambition had been yoked to Cassandra's vision. Now it was my own. Every small victory felt monumental. Landing our first small client, a local artisanal coffee roaster, felt more thrilling than securing $1 million deal at Aura. My proposal for Eleanor Vance and Lumina was a masterpiece. It wasn't just a marketing plan, it was a love letter to her brand. I referenced our past conversations and incorporated ideas she had casually mentioned years ago. I built a strategy around her personal legacy as a female founder. I outlined a plan that was not only data-driven but also deeply human. I sent it off and held my breath. Meanwhile, Greenleaf officially terminated its contract with Aura, citing creative differences, and signed with Phoenix Strategies. It was our first major victory, a cannon shot across Aura's bow. I knew the news would hit Cassandra's desk like a grenade. The loss of a client on the cusp of a massive budget increase would not go unnoticed. The day Eleanor called, I was in my kitchen, reviewing David's brilliant new logo designs for Greenleaf. My phone buzzed and her name flashed on the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Clara," she said, her voice crisp and decisive. "I've reviewed your proposal. It's exactly what I've been looking for. We're in. I'll have my legal team send over the paperwork to terminate our agreement with Aura and draw up a new one with you." I closed my eyes, a wave of dizzying relief washing over me. "Eleanor, thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," she said. And then she added, a note of quiet solidarity in her voice. "I've been in this business a long time, Clara. I've seen women like Cassandra before. They climb on the backs of others and they think no one will notice. I'm glad to see you're building your own ladder." Lumina was Aura's crown jewel. Losing them wouldn't just be a financial blow. It would be a catastrophic loss of prestige. It was a signal to the entire industry that the Empress had no clothes. It was about a week later that I got the call I had been expecting. It was from a number I no longer had saved in my phone, but I recognized it instantly. "Clara." It was Mark. His voice was strained, tight with an anxiety I had never heard from him before. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my tone flat. We need to talk," he said. "What are you doing?" "I'm working," I replied, taking a certain satisfaction in the word. "No, I mean, what are you doing?" he repeated, his voice rising in panic. "Cassandra she's a wreck. First Greenleaf and now Lumina." She said Eleanor Vance wouldn't even take her call. "People are talking. Her investors are calling an emergency meeting." I stayed silent, letting him talk. "She thinks you're behind this," he accused. "She thinks you're deliberately poaching her clients." "Your girlfriend is a very smart woman," I said coolly. He let out a frustrated sigh. "Claire, this has to stop. This is her livelihood. It's my livelihood now, too. You're destroying everything." The sheer audacity of his words sent a jolt of white-hot anger through me. I'm destroying everything?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Let me be very clear, Mark. You and she stood in the rubble of my career and my marriage, and you called it a cleaner way to be together. You didn't think about my livelihood when you conspired to have me fired. You didn't think about our 15 years together when you started sneaking around with my boss. This isn't a game. This is business. And your girlfriend taught me everything I know about making business decisions. I could hear his ragged breathing on the other end of the line. Please, Clara, he begged, his voice dropping to a whisper. For the sake of what we had. Don't do this. What we had is gone, I said, and the finality in my own voice surprised me. The grief was gone. The nostalgia was gone. All that was left was a barren landscape. You burned it to the ground. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a client call. Goodbye, Mark. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, not from weakness but from adrenaline. His panic was the confirmation I needed. My strategy was working. The foundations of their ivory tower were cracking. The public fallout began subtly. A small article in a trade publication mentioned Lumina's surprising move to a new boutique agency, Phoenix Strategies, founded by former Aura marketing head Clara Lawson. The article highlighted my past successes and framed my new venture as a bold new player in the market. It didn't mention the affair, but anyone in our small industry could read between the lines. The story was no longer about me being fired. The story was now about my comeback. The final phase of my plan was the most delicate. I knew Aura had one last major vulnerability: their internal culture. Cassandra ruled by fear. She paid well, but she fostered a toxic environment of competition and burnout. Her top-tier talent, the people I hadn't hired yet, were unhappy. I began reaching out. I took Aura's top data analyst, a quiet genius named Kenji, out for coffee. I had lunch with their head of media buying, Maria. I didn't offer them jobs. I just listened to their frustrations. I talked about the culture of collaboration and respect I was building at Phoenix. I planted a seed. There was a better way to work. The tipping point came during Aura's all-hands emergency meeting, the one Mark had mentioned. A friend still inside the company live texted me the details. Cassandra, usually so poised, was unraveling. She deflected blame, criticized her own team, and announced a hiring freeze and a cut to bonuses. The morale in the room, already low, cratered. That afternoon, Kenji emailed me his resignation letter to Aura. The subject line of his email to me was simple: I'm in. Maria followed 2 days later. I had taken her clients. I had taken her key staff. I had dismantled her company from the outside in, using nothing but my reputation, my relationships, and the knowledge she had so carelessly discarded. Phoenix Strategies was no longer a skeleton crew working from my dining room. We signed a lease on a chic, light-filled office space. Much smaller than Aura's, but it was ours. It buzzed with creative energy and mutual respect. We were winning accounts, producing brilliant work, and building something real. I hadn't stolen her company in a literal sense. I had done something far more damaging. I had made it irrelevant. The news of Aura's decline traveled fast. In the insular world of marketing, reputation is currency, and Cassandra's was in freefall. The narrative had been cemented. She was the ruthless boss who had foolishly cast out her best asset, only to watch that asset build a better, more dynamic company. Her investors, spooked by the loss of 2 major accounts and a subsequent exodus of top talent, began to pull their funding. Aura, once the behemoth of the city's marketing scene, was forced into a series of humiliating layoffs. I never gloated. I never spoke ill of Cassandra in public. My team and I focused solely on our work, letting our success speak for itself. The dignity of our silence was, I think, more damning than any public condemnation could have been. We were thriving not by tearing Aura down but by building something better. The justice was in contrast. The final, public consequence came about 6 months after I started Phoenix. I was attending an industry awards gala. It was a significant event, the kind Cassandra and I used to participate in together, holding court as representatives of Aura's dominance. This year I was there as the founder of Phoenix Strategies. We were nominated for Best New Agency. I was standing near the bar talking to a colleague when I saw them, Mark and Cassandra. It was the first time I had seen them in person since it all fell apart. They were standing alone in a corner, a small, isolated island in a sea of mingling professionals. No one was approaching them. No one was laughing at Cassandra's jokes or vying for Mark's attention. They looked diminished. Cassandra was still beautiful, dressed in a sleek, expensive gown. But her usual radiant confidence was gone, replaced by a brittle, defensive posture. She held her champagne flute like a weapon, her eyes scanning the room with a hunted look. Mark stood beside her looking lost. His suit seemed too big for him, his smile strained. He had hitched his wagon to a falling star, and the reality of that decision was etched on his face. Our eyes met across the room. For a fleeting second I saw a flash of the old Mark, the charming, easygoing man I had loved. It was followed by a wave of regret, shame, and a desperate sort of longing. He looked like a man who had traded a masterpiece for a forgery and was only now realizing his mistake. Cassandra saw me looking, and her face hardened into a mask of pure animosity. She grabbed Mark's arm, a possessive, almost frantic gesture, and turned her back to me. I felt nothing. No anger, no pain. Just a quiet, distant pity. The fire of my revenge had burned itself out, leaving behind not ashes but tempered steel. Later that evening, the award for Best New Agency was announced. When they called out Phoenix Strategies, my team erupted in cheers. I walked to the stage, the applause of my peers washing over me. I looked out at the sea of faces and I saw Cassandra and Mark slipping out a side door, unable to watch. In that moment, standing in the spotlight, I understood the nature of true victory. It wasn't about their destruction. It was about my own reconstruction. It wasn't about making them pay. It was about realizing my own worth. Life began to settle into a new, excellent rhythm. Phoenix grew, but I was careful to maintain the culture we had built. It remained a place of collaboration, creativity, and respect. I was a boss, but I hoped a better kind of boss than Cassandra had ever been. I knew the value of my people because I had once been one of them. I sold the house that Mark and I had shared. It held too many ghosts. I bought a chic, modern apartment downtown with a balcony overlooking the city lights. It was mine, a space filled only with my own history and my own future. I started dating again, cautiously at first. I met a man, an architect like Mark, but where Mark had been all smooth charm and shifting foundations, Michael was quiet, solid, and kind. He loved the story of Phoenix not for the revenge but for the resilience. He saw my strength not as something to be managed or feared, but as something to be admired. One rainy Saturday afternoon, about a year after the awards gala, I was in a bookstore browsing the shelves. As I came around a corner, I nearly ran into someone. It was Mark. He looked older, tired. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by a deep-seated weariness. "Clara," he said, his voice soft. "Mark," I replied, my tone even. An awkward silence hung between us. "I heard you're doing great," he said finally. "Phoenix is, everyone's talking about it." "We're doing well," I agreed. He fidgeted, looking down at the worn carpet. "Things with Cassandra, they didn't work out. I had heard rumors that Aura had finally been bought out for pennies on the dollar by a larger conglomerate and that Cassandra had been forced out. She blamed me," he continued, a bitter edge to his voice. "For everything. For your success. Said I wasn't man enough to stop you." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a sad, desperate hope. "I made a mistake, Clara. A terrible, life-ruining mistake. I think about you every day. I think about what I threw away." I looked at him, at the man I had once promised to love forever. I felt a pang, not of love, but of a sad, final closure. He hadn't loved me. He hadn't loved Cassandra. He had loved the idea of success, of power, of being attached to the shiniest object in the room. When I was that object, he loved me. When she was, he loved her. Now that they were both diminished, he was adrift. "Yes, you did make a mistake," I said, and my voice was not unkind. "But it wasn't just leaving me. It was that you never really saw me. Not for who I was." I gave him a small, sad smile. "I have to go, Mark. I hope you find what you're looking for." I walked away, leaving him standing there among the books. I didn't look back. As I stepped out into the rain, I felt a profound sense of peace. The story wasn't about him or Cassandra anymore. Never really was. It was about a woman who had been stripped of everything she thought defined her. Her job, her husband, her identity. Only to discover that her true self was something no one could ever take away. They hadn't destroyed me. They had liberated me. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. That encounter in the bookstore was the final page in a long and painful chapter of my life. Seeing Mark not as a monster or a villain, but just as a sad, lost man, gave me the last piece of closure I didn't even know I needed. He was a relic of a life I no longer lived, a ghost in a house I no longer occupied. My life now is complete. Phoenix Strategies is more than just a company. It's a community. It's a testament to the idea that you can be successful without sacrificing your soul, that you can lead with empathy and still win. The office is filled with laughter and intense, passionate debate. We celebrate our victories together and we support each other through our challenges. I made a promise to myself that I would build the kind of workplace I had always wanted, and I did. Michael and I are building a life together, slowly and deliberately. It's a different kind of love than what I had with Mark. It's quieter, more mature. It's built not on dazzling chemistry but on a deep, abiding respect. He sees all of me, the strategist, the leader, the woman who was once broken and rebuilt herself. And he loves every part of it. Sometimes when I'm standing on my balcony at night, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city, I think about the woman I was. The woman who defined herself by her job and her husband. The woman who thought her world had ended in that cold, sun-drenched office. I wish I could go back and tell her that her world wasn't ending. It was just beginning. That the most painful betrayals sometimes clear the path for the most profound transformations. The revenge I sought wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative. They tried to write me out of my own story, to reduce me to a footnote in theirs. But in the end, I became the author of a new story. One of resilience, empowerment, and a quiet, hard-won peace. I learned that the best revenge isn't living well to spite them, but living well for yourself. It's building a life so whole and beautiful that there's simply no room left for the ghosts of the past. My story is one of betrayal, yes. But more than that, it's a story about finding your own power when you feel you have none left. It's about understanding that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is the very thing that sets you free. And so, I have to ask you, when you've been wronged so deeply, when you feel erased, what do you do? Do you seek vengeance or do you seek justice? And what's the difference? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and your wisdom mean so much to this community. Thank you for listening.